Okay, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Mondays at Noon. I'm Molly Pepper. I'm the Associate Dean here in the School of Business, and this is our weekly forum, excuse me, where we gather as a community to talk about things that are important to us. We're recording this session, and it will be available on the School of Business YouTube channel. Our guest today is Nancy Thomas, who graduated from the School of Business in 1981. But before we talk with Nancy, we're going to take a pause to reflect and then to engage in two short networking exercises. So because this is a forum in which we gather as a community, I'm going to ask that we just take a moment and reflect on that community. So please join me in just a moment of reflection in gratitude for the Gonzaga community and the connection that we have to one another. Thank you. Next, we're going to hold our breakout groups to allow for a little networking, and then I will turn the session over to Dean Anderson to talk with our guests. Okay, welcome back, everyone. I hope networking groups went well and that you now know a couple more people on the call and that you had the opportunity to share some information. Now I'm going to turn it over to Dean Ken Anderson to introduce our guest.
Well, thank you, Molly. Thanks to everybody for being here today. I'm very excited to be talking with Nancy Thomas. As Molly mentioned, class of 1981 from Gonzaga. And that gives us something in common because I'm also the class of 1981 from Gonzaga. So Nancy and I have this mutually assured destruction pack, I guess, you know, that we're gonna keep it clean as we go through this for the next 40 minutes or so. But excited to have her. She's embarking on a new part of her life, and she'll be telling us about that, I'm sure, as we go through. But Nancy, thank you for being here, and maybe you could start a little bit. How'd you get to Gonzaga?
Oh, goodness. Let's see, Ken. Well, I have, and on the Zoom is my brother Craig Erickson, but it was kind of a family thing. My older two brothers had gone to Gonzaga, and one of my brothers, not the one that's on the Zoom call today, went to Florence. And so I have to be quite honest that that was my attraction, was to spend that year in Florence with Gonzaga. And so I set my sights on Spokane.
Okay. And let me ask you a question that'll make sense to you and I, and probably to Craig, not to too many other people on the call. Did you visit campus before you came to Gonzaga?
Double whammy for sure, on the corner of Hamilton and Boone. And I think my brother Craig took me there. So okay. I for sure came to Spokane. It was lovely. And we took in a baseball game at the time too, which certainly wasn't in the same baseball field that's there today. Right.
Because of course, back in the day, campus visits weren't a thing. For all of you younger folks on the call, you didn't do the Midwest tour, the West Coast tour, the East Coast tour when you were deciding where to go to school. So after Gonzaga, talk a little bit about that.
Wow. So I spent, the year in Florence, which was fantastic because I was with Father Tony Lehman, for the many that might not know him, and he was fantastic. And we were left to him to take care of us because he was Father Reginbald was sick. So we definitely had a fun year in Florence with Father Tony's supervision. And then I came back, and I won't ever forget in the fall when I saw Dan Brasich and said, I didn't think I would be returning to accounting. And he says, I think that's a good idea, Nance. And so I went on my way to focus on marketing with Colonel Harmon was my advisor. But one thing that happened in the School of Business, I think it was probably my junior year, the accreditation hadn't been done. And so for a lot of us, our very, very favorite business teachers were going to be let go of Gonzaga in order for the school to become accredited. And that was a pretty big deal. Ken, I don't know if you remember that.
I do. And as Nancy's kind of referring to, I think there were probably 25 faculty in the business school at the time, and I believe that only 3 had PhDs. Bud had a PhD, John Coles had a PhD, and Jerry Monks had a PhD. And I think that might have been it. And it wasn't until the year after Nancy graduated that Bud started to add people in. And of course, at the same time, people were retiring. So lots of differences between then and now. Makeup of the faculty. We, of course, were in the basement of the administration building as a business school at the time. So when you left Gonzaga, talk about your first job.
Well, so it's interesting because I left with a marketing degree. And of course, and for the students on the line, I thought, well, I should look for all marketing jobs, and I must have went to tons of interviews for marketing only to discover that my true, asset and capabilities was in sales. And I was fortunate to have dinner with 3 engineers in 1982 who needed someone to sell the product that they had developed. And there was just 3 people in the company, and they made a multifunction board for what was coming out, the IBM PC. And I thought, great, I've got this degree, I can do everything for them. But it was actually, they weren't as impressed with the degree as the fact that I had grown up in my family had owned a franchise. And so I understood how a franchise worked, and that was who they wanted me to sell to. We're 600 Computerland stores in the United States. And boy, I dug in. I got my first job, which took a few months because in '82 was another not so good economy that was going on after I graduated. So I got the job, $7.25 an hour, and I was eager to sell whatever they made. And we, over the next 6 years, grew the company to be 6 million. And we had hired a few more people, but not that many. And they sold the company to Imulex, which is a company that still exists today, for $18 million. And so the 3 of them retired, and Nancy went on to work another, 30 years. So pretty interesting story for them. It was a huge success. And for me, I springboard to Western Digital for 10 years. And then I had my eyes set on going to Cisco. And the company was growing and had a lot of great products and was just starting to dabble in what's considered distribution, which is what I became pretty good at, finding, a big distributor to sell to all those computer stores that I originally was assigned to. So it was a quick way back in those days to say, wait a minute, I can sell to this one person and they'll sell to those 600 stores. Or I can call all 600 stores and try to sell them my stuff. So it worked out well. And I was at Cisco. I had a great career there for 23 years. And I did, one of the thought-provoking times I had was back in 2005, after growing the business in the US for Cisco to almost $3 billion, was to have a global view and to approach it not from this is the way we do it in the US, so you should do it that way in Europe and in Asia. It was really to learn and understand their markets. And I think I was super fortunate the last 10 years to spend a good portion of my career outside of the US engaging with, how they do business in Asia and how it gets done in Europe and the Middle East and things like that, and meeting just a huge variety of people along the way. So, which ended up, when I left Cisco in December, it's, was a good time to leave, but who knew the pandemic was coming and everything else. So it was a quite challenging time for someone over the age of 60 to get a new job.
Yeah. So as you as you switch from Gonzaga, you mentioned Western Digital, you talk about Cisco. Let's call that the early part of your career. Lessons learned, things that you wish you would have done different, maybe?
Yeah, well, and during those years, I did do all the high school nights at the local high school to try to push kids to go to Gonzaga. And let me tell you, it was a tough sell. And I was a good salesperson, trying to explain to them where Spokane was on Washington. It's the one Washington on the western part of the United States. So all that going, Ken, I kind of wish, one thing, back in the day, our choices of even, classes and degrees were far more, limited to what there is today. But the one thing, I stuck throughout my career in distribution and in sales, and I didn't take the opportunity to shift around, which big companies usually give you that, that chance. And I regret not having gone into, even though I learned and did all the global stuff, I didn't learn the different workings of a business development manager or maybe a product manager, or go into some of the other areas of the company. But I loved what I did. So it's really hard to make yourself switch into something you're uncomfortable with, and leave something that you're, really good at.
Okay. Most exciting place you visited as part of the Cisco team?
Oh, well, my favorite place is Cambodia, but I always say if I had to live if I could go back in my life and live only one day once again, it would be hiking with Father Tony in Portofino.
Okay.
So
Okay.
that should speak volumes of all the places I've been in the world. I would repeat that day again. Father always lived by the rule of it's not how much you do, but how often you do it. And I've kept that in my back pocket all these years.
Father Tony was an amazing man.
Certainly was. I would go toe to toe with him on push-ups and hiking and all that stuff, trying to beat him. And and his dollar trick, I don't know if how many had the opportunity to see him pick up the $1 bill, holding your ear and your 1 foot up in the air and grabbing it off the ground. It's not a very graceful thing for most people.
And again, for those of you that are relatively new to Gonzaga, and you hear about the passion that our alums have for Florence and for Father Tony and Father Redwell in particular, you can see that now in Nancy, right? You can see why Florence will always be really, really special to Gonzaga, and it's because of what all of you do right now so very well, which is build relationships with our students and our community members, etc. So, but whenever you talk to people who had the Florence / Tony Lehman experience, they typically have that sort of passion and excitement and fondness of those days. So it's pretty cool to listen to you, Nancy. So now you're with Logitech.
Yes.
What do you do for Logitech?
So it's so exciting to join a company who's literally, the company has doubled in sales over the last quarter, the last 3 months. It's like huge. And so to join a company that cannot make enough supply to fill demand is really interesting. The company is 40 years old, and they brought me over, and it's I'll tell the kids too that, despite thousands or hundreds of interviews with a variety of companies, my resume redone 3 times so that the words in the resume would be picked up by the algorithms when they get automatically read. All that was a lot of work to do, and it was Cisco person that brought me to Logitech. So your contacts in the industry and, in business make all the difference in the world, because I didn't send my resume for this position and I didn't do any interviewing. I just started. So there is true value in contacts. But she brought me over to run distribution for them, which is my claim to fame. And it's a global position. And I was pretty surprised to learn at Logitech that, 40 years in business, they're pretty good at, filling up the shelves at Best Buy and all their consumer run stuff, the mice and the keyboards and everything. But what they've done is create a new division that focuses on video collaboration, which is the webcams and the headsets and a lot of these meeting, and I'm sure Ken in the university, the meeting rooms with all the, single touch to do the video are quite popular. And so I am currently trying to set up their distribution, because who they've used in the past aren't necessarily the same distributors that will be the ones that can add value and bring their products into the enterprise or, into the, the enterprises and the conference rooms. And so that's what I'm out to do. And luckily I have good contacts around the globe that are eager to, sign up and put the extra work into selling Logitech into the enterprise.
That's cool. So, we know that your recent search was way different than what happened back in the early 80s. But just your experiences over time, again, mostly with Cisco, what surprised you about being on the job market before you got the Logitech job?
Well, so one thing, I thought this even in the early 80s, and each time it wasn't my resume, that got me the job. It was my sales, expertise, so to speak. But it's just interesting parallels between the two. But I focused these last 6 months on what part of the industry, the IT industry, did I want to be in, and it was collaboration. And then I looked at what companies were in that space and did nothing but study, those companies. I followed, everything that they published. I followed them on LinkedIn, and I joined the webinars that I could join. And I will tell you that the day that I got the call from the woman that wanted to hire me, had I not spent all that time diving deep into the collaboration space, I don't know that I, would have been as ready for that phone call the day that it came, because I was like, right away able to position where Logitech was, what they were doing, who their competitors were, what their new products were. I already had all that knowledge. And so it makes a difference. I personally think you should pick out the company that you want to go to work for, or maybe it can be a little bit broader to the space, but then you really need to do your deep dive into, into that information so that you can be an expert even before you start.
Okay. And certainly today, the research aspect that you just talked about has got to be a lot easier than it was before.
Yeah, the $30 for LinkedIn Premium is worth it. You can go in and find out, who works for who, and so even if you do apply for a job, you can figure out, basically figure out who the hiring manager is if you've got the addition. I think that you need to have the premium version of LinkedIn, but for the time that you're looking for work, it's worth it, because it's just a wealth of information and you're able to just connect. And even before your interview, I found people really liked that if you connected with them on LinkedIn before the interview. So at first I thought it might seem like kind of an invasion of their privacy, but most people liked it.
Okay. Good advice. So here's a question for you from someone in the audience. So your emphasis in school was marketing, and this person writes that most of your careers have been in IT type companies. Did you ever run into problems being a marketing person and being, Nancy Thomas, did you ever run into problems communicating with the IT folks?
You know, I didn't, and it is shocking that I ended up in IT because I took Fortran at Gonzaga, got a D. Was that a passing grade, Ken?
Well, it's only a little bit worse than the C I got in Fortran. So yeah.
Yeah, we had all the big stack of cards and everything. So sometimes I think that, you know, the IT isn't as complicated as we like to think that it is. You know, and you know, someone told me also that marketing is the paperwork of sales. And as soon as I heard there was paperwork too, I said, oh, I definitely want to be in sales.
Nice.
So that was the other determination. But yeah, I wasn't so good at the market, you know, at the sales piece of it. But, you know, you build something and I'll sell it.
So how about, we always talk about, and you've heard us talk about this, Nancy. We always talk about the value of our non-business courses to the education at Gonzaga. Which ones stand out to you from back in the day?
Boy, I don't know whether it's the logic or the religious classes, because I took 4 years of each, and I had to say, surprisingly, those were some of my favorite classes.
Yeah. Any professors that stick out from back then?
Well, there was the one that taught Buddhism, whose name?
Robert Gilmore.
Yes.
Yes.
Those were pretty famous evenings over at his house for the extended class education.
Nice. And what about thinking about your Florence Experiment?
Did just Ken freeze or did everybody?
I think it's just Ken.
Recommending to undergraduate students that they spend a year abroad. Well, okay. How can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. I shut the video down. My dogs got tired, so they didn't want to power the wheel anymore to make the power. Your Florence experience, the experiences you've had professionally, are you a person who would strongly recommend study abroad to an undergraduate student?
Very much so. My own son, Thomas Bender, graduated in 2010, and he, in 4 years, got accounting and finance, double major. But he still did the summer to Florence, which was only a 6-week program. And fortunately, I was able to join him afterwards to extend it to 8 weeks. But those are such memorable trips. There's something about it, you know, and the closest you get with the other kids, that's pretty hard to replace. I mean, I've traveled lots of places around the globe with customers and work associates, but it's just not the same as those weekend trips that you take when you're a student, you know, and you just have your backpack and, you know, a few little bit of money in your pocket.
Okay. So we hit study abroad. What about gender, particularly in sales? Have you seen differences over the years with the role of women or the acceptance of women in those types of positions?
So funny you should ask, because I never, in my career, which is now like almost 40 years, I never felt like I was treated different. I never felt different than anyone else. And so I guess I had a good experience, because in the IT industry, there's lots of different women's groups, you know, supporting each other. And I guess that's important. I don't know why, or if it was because I was in sales, I never felt held back, or, you know, I just, the conversation just never occurred to me. And so maybe that was my own short-sightedness. I just never thought about it. People are just people.
Okay. Let's see. What about staying with the sales thing for a moment? What would you tell an undergraduate in 2020 if they came to you and said, I want to be in sales?
I would say absolutely. There's so many places that you can go, and even good entry level, positions that can allow you to grow within a company. I mean, it's rewarding. You'll get your quota, and to me, it was, always achieving that goal that was so important to me. And I mean, the paychecks are important, but the driver for me was getting my goal, hitting my goal for the company. So if you're goal oriented, sales is a great one to go into.
Nancy, this is your brother. Tell an example of going golfing instead of shopping when you went out on with the conventions and things like that, where with all the guys.
Yeah, so I did always play golf with the men, and I never even thought about it back then. I don't know. My dad always taught me to play golf since I was 6 years old, but he taught me to play quick golf because the men like to play fast golf and keep your ball in the fairway. And so I did that, and I always found that to be a lot more enjoyable. So maybe I did earn my rights on that side of the business with the men. But like I said, I never really thought about it that much. The whole gender thing, which today is such a big topic.
Yeah. So knowing how to play golf, being goal directed, other advice you'd have for our students?
Well, one thing that and I don't even know if it's possible because the tuition back then was expensive, but I did take student loans out and I paid for my own education, because then I felt when I finished, if I wanted to be a waitress, I could be a waitress. I could do whatever I wanted. So I would say if you, are able to invest or have, ownership in your education, what you do with it afterwards can be pretty meaningful.
Okay. Other questions from the audience? Molly looks like she's thinking of something.
AJ didn't wear her glasses this week.
Well, I appreciated the story about golf because something that we do here in the School of Business once a year is have a little golf tournament and sort of break the ice for those who've never played before to learn, because I think if you don't know, a golf course is kind of a mysterious place and there's so many etiquette rules and that sort of thing. So if you would, I assume you would encourage us all to learn to play.
Yeah, I mean, I enjoy it. I just have fun. I don't always care, have to count every stroke, but it was always a big thing. And on Mother's Day, I always made my boys take me golfing because the courses were empty. It's the best day to go golfing.
That is a great tip. I never thought of that before. I bet it's crowded on Father's Day, but
it's Mother's Day. It's not. And my two boys, the last time we went, I got a call from someone and turned away, and I came back to hit my ball because I was up, and they had replaced it with one of those exploding balls. Oh, they thought it was just so hilarious. And of course, I didn't even clue in that it was a larger ball or anything. Just hit it and it exploded, and it was everybody else's good laugh on me.
So last question for you. How do you do your job right now? Are you completely remote? Are you a big fan now of Zoom and obviously some Logitech technology?
Yeah, it's hard. I mean, for me, I was kind of an overlay for 10 years at Cisco in a global role. And so this was my life. I was traveling as well, but video conferencing was my life. Talking to Asia at 10 o'clock at night and getting up at 5 a.m. to work with my European colleagues. And I'm back doing that again. And it's all on video with not even the next week I get to fly to France or go somewhere. So it's interesting. It's a lot more draining this time around, the video conferencing, than I ever felt in previous years, just because there were the days you could whip to the office or go have lunch with people and things like that. So I think sales are difficult too. I mean, I'm fortunate to be at Logitech where, we can't make enough to satisfy the demand. I would assume other companies, things are not so easy from a sales perspective.
Okay. So building on that, the notion of being able to get away from the screen and go to lunch or go into the office, do you think the work from home thing is gonna be a thing, or are we gonna get back to most people go into an office?
Well, for Logitech, all of our offices in Asia are open, and the folks have returned to the offices. And that's most companies, not just Logitech. So, yeah, I think in Europe, I think has had some stop and start. So we're expecting the enterprises to go back, even if it's for maybe not the everyday cubicle, where someone's sitting every day at their desk. But we believe that the conference rooms and things like that will need to be set up technology-wise for, a group of 6 or 10 or, whatever the numbers can be maintained at will go in, because people are eager to go back.
Okay, that's a great insight. Thank you. Last question for sure this time. If you were coming to Gonzaga to recruit our students, what would you be looking for?
Well, I've sent lots of folks your way, Ken. You mean what I would look for at Gonzaga?
Yeah, what you would look for in a new hire?
Oh, a new hire. I think that the Jesuit education, I'm like 100% believer in that well-roundedness. And I think more than ever, that speaks to what the companies are doing today with the, they have to be concerned about the environment and, eco-friendly and all that kind of stuff. So I think that it's, those are going to be super important.
Okay, so the broad-based education, the fact that our students might be involved in things outside the classroom, those things are all positive for you.
100%. I mean, if that's usually where the interviews go too. You find some common ground. That's why I said looking up those people on LinkedIn, you can see where they went to school, where they lived, where they worked previously, and find some common nuggets, that allow you to have a bigger, a more broader conversation than just, the job itself, because just making that connection with the person goes a long way.
Yeah, cool. Well, all right. Well, thank you, Nancy.
Thanks, Ken.
That was awesome. Lots of good ideas for us. Molly, I'll kick it back to you.
Okay, well, thank you everyone for being here. Hope you can join us next week on Monday at noon.